When Hofstra University hosted the third and final presidential debate in 2008, an area known as a free speech zone was set aside for community and student protesters. Again in 2012, Hofstra welcomed the presidential debate back to campus for the second presidential debate, and again a free speech zone was established. Whereas the debate was held on the north side of campus, the free speech zone was located on the south side of campus and across Hempstead Turnpike. Given its location, the zone was out of sight of both Democrat and Republican candidates. Even students who wanted to enter the free speech zone needed to leave the regularly scheduled events taking place in the heart of campus and make a special trip to the zone. As a student on campus in 2012, I had no idea that such a site existed, and I wish I had. Here with us to discuss the free speech zone on Hofstra's campus during both presidential debates at Hofstra is alumnus Ian Wilder. Ian currently serves as the secretary for the Green Party of Suffolk County. Good afternoon, Ian.
Hello, Rebecca. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for being here with me. I really appreciate your time. So let's jump right in. You were present at the Free Speech Zone, also known as a public area, a protester pen, for both 2008 and 2012 debates. Can you define a free speech zone in your own words and your own experience?
Sure. Well, to me, a free speech zone as a concept violates the spirit, if not the letter of the U.S. Constitution. The whole point of the First Amendment is that our whole country was supposed to be a free speech zone. That was kind of the concepts that we fought for. Free speech zones, as they're defined, illustrate to me how the Bill of Rights have been shredded over the last couple of decades, by the two corporate parties. They are caged in areas, where it's the only place where speech is actually free at certain events, not corporately sponsored, and it's safe out of sight of a carefully curated corporate message. In Hofstra's case, it not only was on the opposite side of Hempstead Turnpike, it was at a far corner of the campus, away from any other programming at all. So no one would be likely to happen upon it by accident and say, oh, what's going on here? You would have to literally walk over to it and purposely want to go there. For Hofstra, I described it as often a cage. It was a large area, but it was completely fenced in. Strangely enough, there were metal detectors to get in, which made no sense except for maybe dissuading participants or possibly students from coming in because there was an extra barrier to getting in. But it's funny because the metal detectors didn't keep the most dangerous thing from getting in, which are ideas. And those were there. The people who were inside, it was very funny, were often the people who were also on Hempstead Turnpike. So the metal detectors were kind of pointless because people who were demonstrating on metal detectors did not have to pass through any kind of security, and they were actually slightly closer to the debate. So I'm not quite sure what the real purpose of that is. Now, to be fair, Hofstra did set up a support structure for the zone. I actually not only was there, I was on the schedule and spoke both times. And there was a stage for speakers, there was amplification so you could be heard within that fenced area, and there was Hofstra staff there keeping the schedule so people could speak at the times they were allotted.
Okay, great. Thank you. Wow, that's information that I definitely had no idea what it even looked like, and certainly not the metal detectors. That's very interesting. So who else, I think we said a couple of students, but who else was present at the Hofstra Free Speech Zones?
It was mostly activists and speakers speaking to each other. If there were students, there were very, very few. And, especially as an alumnus, that was something very disappointing to me because it's not what I expect of a university. And it's a shame because the students could have gotten firsthand accounts of viewpoints that they weren't getting elsewhere on campus. I also attended a lot of the campus programs both times. And I particularly remember one program that my wife and I attended that were being given by two Hofstra professors And unfortunately, to me, the program that was given was derivative of the same thing that the two corporate candidates were going to say inside the debate. So it was the same kind of ideas being restated. Instead of, in the free speech area, you had a garden of diverse opinions. You had Occupy activists, anti-Zionist Hasidic Jews, evangelical Christian climate activists, veterans against the war, Green Party candidates, libertarian activists, all expressing ideas that you weren't hearing elsewhere.
Absolutely. I was wondering, actually, I was looking at some of those photos that I've seen online, some on your website, and I was curious, what happens, it seemed like some people were outside of the zone aligned on Hempstead Turnpike. Were those individuals allowed to stay, or were they encouraged to relocate to the free speech zone? How did that work?
No, they were allowed to stay.
Okay.
The general rules are that if you're on a public sidewalk, as long as you continue moving, they can't tell you can't be there. And they were on the sidewalk on the far side, away from where the debates were, and mostly away from where campus were. It was security, basically the security building heading east and the opposite corner. So they were mostly away from where the students were and all the action were, but they were on there. They didn't try and close off that area. The police were helpful in that area. They were mostly there to make sure that people were safe, and that the people who maybe weren't experienced at such things made sure they stayed off Hempstead Turnpike so no one got injured. So there was a free flow along the south side of Hempstead Turnpike of demonstrators and ideas. It was difficult for them to get into actually the speaking area because they had to walk around and basically separate themselves from the so-called free speech area. They could see it somewhat through a fence on one section. Yes.
Okay, very good. So thinking back to the 2008 debate, can you tell us what happened to the 15 demonstrators who attempted to speak with party candidates? Nick Morgan was one particular individual we had in mind.
Sure. I was not an eyewitness, but I was a supporter of them before and after what happened, so I am aware of it. It was mostly a group of veterans. They felt, because of their service, that they had a right to be heard and that they weren't being heard. And they were actually correct, because if people remember in the 2000 debate, Obama spoke up and said he would actually increase our troop presence in Afghanistan, which left McCain completely stunned because Obama had gone to his right militarily. So the voices of peace and the veterans who want to speak for peace weren't being heard. The reaction to their peaceful approach of the debate site was that the police appeared on horseback, and unfortunately one of the veterans was even trampled by one of the horses. That kind of dangerous situation was not needed at all.
Wow. Okay. All right, so although only 2 candidates are permitted on the debate floor, as we know, there are certainly other presidential candidates whose voices go unheard. In 2012, Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein was arrested along with her running mate, Sherry Hunkala?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us more about that event and its aftermath in terms of results, media coverage, etc.?
Sure. It's true that basically the 2 corporate parties have control of the debates and they lock everybody else out. Since it's been taken over from the League of Women Voters, they created a corporately funded front organization called the Commission on Presidential Debates that basically locks out anybody else from being on the platform. Now, what I believe Jill Stein, and I agree, believe should happen is if a candidate has done the monumental task of getting on enough individual state ballots to be elected president, then they should be on that stage. Like in 2008, I wasn't a direct eyewitness to that, though I was in the area and I was a supporter before and after. Jill Stein, again, peacefully approached the site, as the veterans had, and in some ways their message overlapped. Stein represented a message of peace. One of the 4 pillars of the Green Party is nonviolence. Also, like the veterans, Stein felt that she had earned the right for a message to be heard because thousands of Americans worked in different states who all have different rules in order to put her on 85% of the ballots, which is more than enough to be elected president. Instead, she was arrested and held shackled to a chair for 8 hours. The corporate coverage of that was pretty nil. In fact, it was disappointing because the Hofstra professors I mentioned earlier just briefly mentioned that a Green Party supporter was arrested. They weren't even aware that this person was a presidential candidate and was on the ballot across the country. It's one of the reasons I was very disappointed and left that presentation because I felt they were ill-informed.
And I think we were lucky that it was Amy Goodman, was it, who was on campus, who at least covered that a little bit.
Yes.
Gave the due credit.
And I do give Hofstra credit for giving Amy Goodman the space to broadcast. She's an independent, non-corporate broadcaster,
yes.
And she covered it in depth.
Good. Okay. All right, how does a free speech zone impact visibility when it comes to major media outlets, et cetera? Where Fox, CNN, NBC, were they at the free speech zone? Were they taking footage and interviewing candidates?
Oh, no, they weren't there at all. But my answer might surprise you because free speech zones, cordoning off other speech really doesn't affect their coverage because they won't cover those ideas anyway. They have a very narrow band of corporately approved ideas that they're going to cover anyway. I would say if those speakers were standing on the floor of where the debate was happening, they would cut to something else also, regardless of whether it's considered a corporate left station or a corporate right. Those voices just aren't heard.
Wow. Okay. And I think, do you know if anyone from the campus, was there, I know in one of the shots that I saw, there was a WRHU, I believe it was Christopher Remington, actually, that did have a WRHU mic flag that was maybe doing a little bit. Did you interact with students who were, trying to capture any of this on audio or video footage?
The students I saw were ones on the protest demonstration area along Hempstead Turnpike. I really didn't see any reporting inside the so-called free speech zone at all.
Okay. All right, so it must have just been on the Turnpike. Okay. Apart from the free speech zone at Hofstra, have you ever been confined to a free speech zone elsewhere in any other venues?
I've been thinking about that, and it's a tough question because I know of places where there's been. I've been to a lot of demonstrations,
yes.
But I haven't been the ones where the free speech zones are more common. I've been to places with restrictions like Zuccotti Park, but I really don't consider that a free speech zone because the participants actually chose that zone for visibility and message. Where free speech zone, the participants are totally cut out of the discussion of where it is or how it's going to be portrayed.
Okay. And for the record, the free speech zone on college and university campuses. So I believe this is the case that regardless of if it's at Hofstra or another university, that I don't know who makes the call, if it's the Secret Service, if it's the Commission on Presidential Debates, but I do believe that that's sort of a requirement where it's placed and all of that. That's probably a group effort, but I do think that might be something that is sort of expected if a university is going to host, but it's something that I've been looking into a little bit further. All right, so I guess where I want to leave our listeners, and I wish we had more time, but where can our listeners find you on the web if they want to get in touch, if they want to read more about this specific issue or maybe something else about the Green Party or the debates? I mean, any of this, where can they look?
Okay, I just want to make one quick comment, and then I'll get to that.
Sure.
You're right, and the rules from the commission are very strict, but that probably didn't stop the university from finding ways to have the students interact, which they didn't try and do at all.
Yes.
I'm very easy to find on the web. We have a website called onthewilderside.com. That's onthewilderside.com. You can contact me through that. You can email me. It's my first name, Ian, I-A-N, last name Wilder, W-I-L-D-E-R, and the number 7 @gmail. And I'm very, very Googleable. It's me, basically, and a dead English Tory MP. So, who show up in hits, so I'm pretty easy to find.
Very good. All right. Well, Ian, thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
Once again, that was Ian Wilder, Secretary for the Green Party of Suffolk County. And if you enjoyed this interview, please stay tuned because we have more on the way on free speech zones, particularly as they occur on American college and university campuses. Until then, stay tuned. 88.7 FM, WRHU, Radio Hofstra University.